Hello, my name is Deborah, and I am the author of the Babbage Parallel series, Reflections on the Decline of Belief in Science and Religion. I am having discussions with various experts on various topics covering science, religion, and culture. And this brings me to my next guest, Joseph Tawadros. Joseph, if you could please introduce yourself.
I'm Joseph Tawadros, oud player and composer, performer. I guess that's what I kind of do. It's very hard to describe yourself. I'm still figuring it out, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. I'm one of those somewhere to someone. So, for those who don't know, the oud is the ancestor of the lute. And for those who don't know the lute, it's that instrument that's it's a stringed instrument that has kind of a half pear-shaped back, short neck, this kind of peg box at an angle, and yeah, you see it in those, you can see it in the Caravaggio paintings and things like that. So yeah, the oud is the ancestor of the lute, and the word lute comes from al oud lute. So that's rough, brief historical background. I guess there's an ancient Egyptian prototype said that's taken by the Persian, made into something called the barbat, which looks like a lute but with a skin covering, and then that is then turned into the modern day oud by the Arabs, and that was taken to Spain in the 9th century and then spread around Europe, etc., etc.
Oh, so it seems like the oud has been very present across lots of different cultures. It hasn't been sort of very specific, but also I wonder what drew you to playing it. Were you inspired by different artists? I think people watching may have heard of Fairuz and people like that who really brought that music and made it slightly contemporary and made it slightly different to how it had been used before. Did that inspire you as well?
I think it was really my search for my Egyptian culture, because I was born in Egypt, but my family immigrated with me, of course, to Australia at the age of 2, and so I was always heard the stories about Egypt, and my uncle was a great trumpet player in Egypt and involved in Arabic music. So I was, that's something I looked up to, and I just enjoyed hearing about that and had a thirst to go back and learn about my heritage and that sort of stuff. And then I saw the oud in a movie. My parents were big Arabic movie buffs and music buffs, so we always had music around the place, and it's just music I grew up on and movies that I grew up on, and the oud was prominent in these films, and when I saw it I was attracted to it, and that's, I guess, where I was really first wanting to play the oud. And then later on, my uncle said, your grandfather played, and sent me these photos, so that made a nice link to the heritage. So for me, it's a link to my Arabic heritage. It's one that I love, and the music that I listen to is actually of Kulthum, the great Arabic diva. She's one of my favorites. So I'm still listening to traditional Arabic music, but with the stuff that I do now is a little bit further away from that.
Right, okay. So did you mention that you wanted to go back to Egypt and find your roots and find some of your history there? Did you visit
Well,
Egypt?
yeah, I ended up going at the age of 14. I was working a few jobs to make that happen. My parents weren't very well off, and they didn't have the means to send me overseas, but I really had a desire to do that. So I was working all sorts of jobs as a youngster to make that happen. I really had a thirst to buy a new oud as well, because whatever I got was just basically from Australia. It's some rough one from Australia. So I was really excited to get a new one, and I'd saved up for that as well.
So in terms of music in general, particularly involved oud, do you find that it's more present in contemporary music? There are obviously some amazing Egyptian artists, there are amazing Australian artists. Where did you find your niche as well?
I was listening to all sorts of players, and the internet was starting up then. That was the kind of advantage, that it was just starting up. I mean, everything downloaded took days. It took forever to download something. I mean, not that much, but yeah, it took forever to download anything. So, but it was starting up, and I did have access to the internet at school. So that's where I started to look further into the culture and history and things like that, and things that people were posting, and the things that I had access to. But in Australia, there wasn't very many oud players. Well, I mean, there are many oud players, but they're not in a professional sense. They kind of all have different other jobs. You go to your local mechanic, and he probably plays the oud, and the there are these Arabic restaurants on the weekend, and there tend to be musicians there, but they all have day jobs during the week and don't dedicate themselves to music full time. So that's I think the difference that happened with me is that I was always very passionate about it. I wanted it as a career at some point, even though I was advised against it. In the Middle East, we always look at things like that as a hobby, not as a career. So that's something that had to push through, and lucky I pushed through, and I kind of have a career now, I guess.
That's amazing as well. Did this spur you on to learn other instruments as well?
Yeah, I mean, when I went back to Egypt, I was so interested in all the other traditional instruments. I mean, the Egyptian traditional ensemble, let's say, it's called a takht, Takht, basically features the oud, which is known as the king of instruments, usually the leader. It's also the instrument of choice for composers because they can sing and play along at the same time, and also it has quarter tones because it's a fretless fingerboard. There's none of those metal bits that you see on a guitar, or those tied bits that you see on a lute, for instance. That help your finger guide your finger to a note. The oud is fretless like a violin or a cello, so you have the capability of sliding and portamento and all that sort of stuff, or vibrato and things like that are just off the finger, not having to bend the string. So yeah, it was. I don't know where I was going with that. I've lost my train of thought on that one, but it was good. I was coherent there for a second, Deborah. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't know. You asked me another question. I got lost in the middle of that.
So you came across a lot of instruments, but
Yeah, that's the point. There we go. I should tell you, by the way, I'm quite jet lagged. I've just come back from America, so I had a tour there. So I'm still in that phase, So basically, I go straight from the bed into a podcast, basically, So, yeah. So the other instruments. So yes, here we go. We've got the king of all instruments, the oud, and then we've got the kanun, which is like a flat trapezoidal zither or harp. It's a beautiful instrument. The strings are grouped into threes, and they're plucked with fingers, little pieces of horn with rings on the fingers, and they're plucked. Then you have the ney, which is the reed flute. It's just a flute, with 6 holes and 1 thumb hole. And that's seen as a very old instrument as well. That's also kind of an ancient Egyptian instrument, the ney. And then you have the rek, which is the Egyptian tambourine. It's just basically a tambourine, but it plays all sorts of rhythms and cycles and things like that. My brother James Tawadros is a great master of it. He tours with me. So if you see any clips online, the guy next to me playing percussion is my brother, usually a guy with a colorful beard. And then later on, the violin was added. So the Western violin was added, but instead of the tuning being on the violin, on the classical violin, G, D, A, E, in the Arabic world, the violin's tuned G, D, G, D. So an octave apart. So yeah, so that's an interesting, and that's said because it was replaced the rababa, which had 2 strings, so they kind of just added the other 2 for players to play with. And in Morocco, they play it upright like a rababa, but in the Egyptian school, they play it like a normal classical player, a Western classical player. So that's your ensemble, basically. That's your takht. And then later on, that expanded, of course. They added cellos and stuff, made the orchestras big. And if you look at Arabic ensembles now, they're massive. They're big with big, a lot of strings, more like a Western classical orchestra. But something that you should notice if you look at the clips, all the bowings are different. So if you look at the violin section, they never follow the same bow because each one has their own technique and own expression and own ornaments, I guess. And so when you play Arabic music, it in that style, it provides a heterophony, these kind of like mini differences that add to the sound of the music.
That's so interesting. It seems like Egyptian music as well is quite a front runner when it comes to these things in the Arab.
Well, it's front runner because of the Cairo was such a cosmopolitan society. It was such an important, in the development of the last 100 years, the development of cinema and all that sort of stuff, cinema and radio and all of that. Cairo was a hub, it was like, New York or London. And if you were, wanting some sort of fame or fortune in the Middle East, you would fly, well, you would go and go try your luck in Cairo, and that's, the great Farid Al-Atrash, who is a great oud player and singer. He's from Syrian background. He's Druze Syrian background. So his family fled Syria and went to Egypt. Like, I don't know, maybe in the 20s. Um, so yeah, so Egypt was the hub, and so you had all these great oud players and composers and musicians all in the one area.
Wow, that's really incredible. So, what is your experience also of being Egyptian Australian? Because that's a unique experience, and I wonder
Yeah, I'm a unique man.
for you.
Yeah, I'm rare. I'm like a dodo. Aussie Egyptians, you don't get too many of those, I tell you. They're going extinct. No, yeah, I mean it's an interesting experience. I do like it. I do like it. Yeah, I liken myself to the dodo. Yeah, I went there. No, yeah, it was an interesting experience. I mean, and it's also playing the oud. I find myself such a character anyway. I don't know how this character kind of develops, but I think it's because of being Aussie and Egyptian. The Egyptians have a very good sense of humor. They're known for their sense of humor. I don't maybe not sometimes in the media. They don't like to portray that part, but the Egyptians are known as the funny ones of the region. Again, with the development of cinema and all that sort of stuff, there's a comic theater is a big thing in Egypt called Masrahiyat, and people watch them and they've grown up on them, and they quote them. Actually, they're such a part of popular culture, these things. And then you got the Australian larrikins. They're also very similar. So I guess I'm half Australian, half Egyptian. Really, I really love my Egyptianness and my Australianness, to be honest. And they live side by side. But when it comes to music, of course, I play an oud, which is representative of Egyptian and Arabic culture and Arabic music. So that's something that I'm aware of, and I'm very proud of, and something that I'd like to put forward, because a lot of people forget about the beautiful things in the Middle East, especially in this day and age. People are easily able to waffle off things that are negative without seeing the basic day-to-day amazing things that the Arab world has brought to the West, and things like that. And also, I'm from a Coptic background, so Coptic are the Christian Egyptians. They're a minority, but they're still over 10 million people, because the population of Egypt is so large. It's the biggest Christian population in the Middle East. So a lot of people forget that there are Christians in the Middle East, and a lot of people forget that Christianity started in the Middle East. So that's another thing. So you have three aspects there. You have my Egyptianness, you have my Copticness, and you have my Australianness all mixed together while I'm playing the oud. So, yeah, it's about finding your feet in all of those places. Some places feel like home, but actually most of those areas feel like home. When I'm at the church, talking to friends or priests or bishops or anything like that, I feel very at home, because I was brought up in that environment. And Australia, I guess I was in the public schooling system. We weren't from a very wealthy family, a very poor family actually, but grew up in a place called Redfern, went to Redfern Public School, which was really low on the social economic ladder. And then and then Egypt is just an amazing place to be. So I love being in Cairo, and one of my first stops is to go get myself a fez. I'm not wearing a fez today. I'm wearing a beret, getting a little bit more cultured. I just like a hat, all right? Don't judge me. And that's about it, really. So, yeah, a lot of things make myself up. But the main thing, I think, being brought up in Australia was such a multicultural society with so many great cultures and things. We're exposed to them. We have a lot of choice, and we're exposed to a lot of great foods and art and music. And I think that's influenced my style, my thirst to collaborate with other people, my thirst of learning about the other person. And the more you learn about someone different to you, the more that affects your music, and the more that grows and expands your mind. So I've always been thirsty to find other things and explore the instrument that I'm playing in a different way.
I wonder if
Is that the longest sentence in history? Probably. I don't know.
No, but it was highly interesting. And actually, what I was taking from it was that you have such a knowledge of Egypt. You have such a knowledge of what it is to be Coptic Christian, what it is to be Christian in the Middle East, what it is to be Australian, and also to be often in London as well, and in London now. I wonder, do you find that people often don't have that level of understanding of different cultures as you do, because you've grown up with different languages, you've grown up with different sounds, and there are so many people, particularly here in Britain, and I'm sure it must be similar in Australia, where they don't learn another language, they don't listen to any. There is no branching out whatsoever. They don't see a reason for it. How do you approach those people in your life? Because I imagine that must be somewhat sometimes difficult.
I think the disappointing thing, there isn't a thirst. Like I had a thirst maybe because I had that cultural background, but there isn't a thirst, I think, in some parts of Australia and a lot of people, and here in the UK, a lot of people are indifferent, you know what I mean? And also they haven't got the avenues to be attracted to something else, you know? Whereas when I was at school, you know, one teacher brought in a cassette tape of classical music, Western classical music. It was Bach. And I was like, wow, that sounds good. I like that. And then I was like, oh, can I hear more of that? So that helped me. So I know there's like little things that, you know, funding to schools being cut and things like that, and programs being taken away. But, you know, governments don't see the greater impact of what that does to a human being and the development of a child, for instance. So I'm the advocate. Even a radio program. We used to have a radio program in Australia called The Planet, which was you know, it just had music from different cultures. In fact, when I was like really young and coming up, I recorded some improvisations on a cassette tape and on a CD, and I sent it to the show and they played it. You know what I mean? So that was also in the development of my career. So things like that, where I was like, you know, little programs like that. But I think, yeah, the disappointing part is that maybe the knowledge, the desire is being taken away from people. I guess we have the internet and all that sort of stuff, and you know, TikTok. I'm not sure how that helps, but you know, maybe people get attracted in that sense. But I like a challenge. Like when I'm in Australia, I have a lot of Australian audiences, and I actually do a lot of jokes on stage when I can, not with the orchestral shows so much because there isn't usually any time. But when the show is a mine with my quartet or a solo show, I really let loose. I like doing a bit of comedy in between, and not comedy about the Middle East or anything like that. Maybe sometimes that comes up, but just you know, easing people in, and also, you know, showing people that I'm one of them in a way. You know, it's a good icebreaker and having a joke. And also I find the inverted commas world music scene one that's not very funny at all. You know, so I like making fun of that because it's very serious. People, you know, people that go and see world music, they're always so serious and respectful, and they want to sit in their chair and be respectful to the artist, and they glorify the artist, and they always call them a master. Oh, this master of the whatever, this virtuoso of the, you know, it's just like, come on, man, just take it easy. You know what I mean? They're just normal human beings, you know, in a caftan, relax, you know, chill out for a second. Everybody calm down. So I always laugh at that when they say, "Oh, Joe, you're the master of this." Ah, look, I'm just a player, whatever. But you know, so I guess we've got that Aussiness of, you know, you can't glorify yourself in Australia anyway. No one likes that. So it's like, oh, mate, look at that guy. Oh yeah, he's a master, is he? You know, so. Yeah, but I love playing to Australian audiences. I love having a laugh, and it's funny that actually all the places I play around the world, I'm still able to make them laugh, which is good news. Just try and it's always a challenge. Sometimes I worry more about the jokes than the music, but no, it's good. And I think if you practice hard and you can deliver some music that people enjoy and can see that you've put in an effort, obviously, and has some technical skill and things like that, then that's acceptable. But I can never make the jokes if I was not playing well. You know, that's the thing. You have to kind of back it up with some playing. There's nothing worse. Otherwise, I'd just be a clown. You know, just playing around. So yeah, it's important that you have to back up any sort of humor. That's my advice to any musicians that want to do some humor: is that make sure you back it up with the music. Otherwise, you're just a crap comedian.
As a positive comedian, yes.
Yeah, you just crap, because that's the thing. Also, some of these jokes are terrible, and if they don't hit the mark, which you know they're all right, people know the sentiment. You know, you can just fall into playing. You're like, all right, and here's some music. Whereas a comedian doesn't have that luxury. They're just like on stage with a microphone. You know, they've got nowhere to go. Whereas I've got, all right, here we go. Let's just play some music now. And people tend to forget. So that's the advantage of playing an instrument while you do some crappy jokes.
Well, I wonder if actually bringing that kind of humor really opens people up. I think that people are more relaxed when they're laughing.
Yeah, I think people should. I think artists should, like, you know, just put your personality across. I think they feel more connected to the artist because the artist all of a sudden isn't this glorified, glowing deity on stage. It's finally like one of us who wants to have a laugh. And you know, what's better than, you know, the audience going, oh, yeah, oh, this is, you know, funny and having a good time. I think that's why people like comedy and stuff. It just eases them up, and people are always looking to have a good laugh. And I think the beautiful things of life is music, and laughter. And so, I really think it's a good thing to do. I mean, I go over the top a lot of the time. Sometimes I go on these massive rants, but nothing too serious. All very clean humor.
That's a wonderful thing. And I kind of want to go back actually to something you said about children having access to different cultures. And I happen to agree with that. I grew up from a young age being around lots of different cultures too. And I feel that the way I approach things now as an adult is different. If I come across new music for the first time from a culture I've never heard before, even if I'm not sure about it, I'll keep playing more of it, and then I'll get the hang of it, and then I love it. And I understand what they're trying to put across. I understand what's going on, and I love that music. And I'm there. But for those who didn't grow up with that background, it does seem that there's this sticking point of, what's that? And there's this, and it's so sad because there's so much technique, emotion, expression that they miss out on because they can't take the time to sort of understand what's being or what's going on here.
But don't you think that's in language as well? Some people don't really look at the intention of what people say. You know what I mean? They take things at face value, and that's where a lot of misunderstanding happens. When things are taken at face value and not seen as intention, or certain expressions, I think we fall into a lot of dangerous times with things like that. But I'm more talking about the sense of just children being exposed to it so they can see if they like it or not, and if they like something, then exploring that. There's a lot of kids that love ancient Egypt because, at school they're taught about, the pyramids and stuff like that. They're like, you see that they have these thirsts, they want to go to Egypt, and, it's things like that. So, I was lucky being in Australia, exposed to all sorts of, as I said, great musicians. I remember one, being exposed to a great Indian tabla player in Australia, Bobby Singh, when I was still starting out. So, there was all a wealth of musicians. And also I ended up playing at this like Asian music and dance festival that they had run by an institute called the Institute of Eastern Music, which was like run by two people, and so there was avenues for things like that. And that's how I really kind of started my career. But again, it's just about the youngsters having I guess a platform. But again, I'm like an old man. I'm like, I'm not that old, but I feel like an old man with the development of all this technology. So I have no idea about the TikTok, generation and social media. And I'm sure there's going to be a million other apps by the time I'm, at the end of my career. I'll have a million other apps I've never heard of be phased out for the younger generation in some sort of, 3-second clips by then. All music will be about half a minute by then.
Yeah, I think so. The attention spans will be about this.
Well, I'm from the generation of albums, like even when I make an album, the order of the track is very important, but now it's not. It's a you'll be lucky to get one track on a playlist. You know what I mean? That's your goal in musical streaming, let's say, or recorded music, is that one of your pieces becomes on a playlist. I find this very bizarre. Back in the day, you used to be excited about an artist buying an album. I used to do that as well. I used to wait for certain artists to buy their album. Wow, he's got a new album out. Let's get it. And then you'd listen to it and you'd love it. And, it was almost, you adopted the lifestyle as well. You're like, I love this. But now, who buys an album? Sometimes the artists that I used to buy albums for, they're pulling out new albums. I don't even listen to them, because it's just like that. I don't know. It's something like always having a buffet of music. Streaming has almost created a buffet of music in a way. And it's just too much and it's too overwhelming. And, unless somebody gives you a tip, you're not really, on the search for it anymore. That's my personal thing that's happened now with the development of streaming. Are you a streamer?
No, I'm not. Should I be?
No. Well, I mean, no, but that's the current world, isn't it? Like people stream movies and then they stream music. You know what I mean? It's like, back in the day, again, you get the album, you have the liner notes, and you read what the artist was saying. I still print CDs with my albums, and I always have a poem in there or some liner notes. And people miss out if they don't buy the CD. You're not going to find that online. So, if you want the understanding of what's behind the music and things like that, I think it's important to have some sort of written material with it.
That makes a lot of sense, and actually, it might be worth just describing to the audience what Indian tabla is, because people might not be.
Oh yeah, Indian tabla. They're these, they're two little drums bongo-esque. You know, my Indian tabla friend, they used to call him Bongo Dude. You know, in Australia, I think he gave a workshop at one of the schools, and it's like, it's Bongo Dude. These two little drums, one bigger than the other, and yeah, they sit on the ground like all Indian musicians. They sit on the ground and they yeah. I always felt like you could never be a Indian congas player because you have to stand up. Unless you you put a hole in the stage, you could never be able to play congas. All the other musicians are sitting down. And I made the mistake. I played with Indian musicians once, and I sat down on the ground, and you know, as respect and all that sort of stuff. And then I got a dead leg. You know, I got pins and needles. No one told me I had to get up at the end. I was like, I was struggling. I almost fell off the stage. Like, that's the thing. And I said to the guy, "How do you guys do it?" In the Indian tabla, he was saying to me, he puts his metal hammer on there. You know, they all have their different techniques of sitting down because they sit down for long periods of time. But now when I play with any Indian musicians on the ground or anything, I'm on a chair. I can't do it. I'm sorry, mate. I'd love to help you. I'd love to be down there. I just haven't got it in me, mate. So, yeah.
It's you know, you're being honest. That's the important thing, you know.
You know, well, I mean, I've got to play the music. I can't be worried about getting pins and needles. And this is true. At the concert, I nearly fell off the stage because I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, well, I have a leg. And if I put my leg down, I should just stand, shouldn't I? But no, if you can't feel your leg, you're going to, it doesn't work like that. I thought my leg was just going to be like, okay, I got a leg, right? I can't feel it at the moment, but it should just stand, shouldn't it? No. I just nearly fell off the stage. People like half laughed and half went, ooh, thought I might have had some disease or something, you know. So it was, yeah, it was pretty bad because I had to juggle myself out of it. But, you know, I managed to regain my balance and, you know, yeah. Anyway, that was the end of my sitting down music career.
Gotcha. It makes a lot of sense. I don't think I could either.
Yeah.
In fairness,
have you seen? You're a violinist. You've seen the Indian violinists. They put the scroll on the foot. You know, have you seen that? Yeah, yeah. So they've got their own position. Everyone's got their own position to make things comfortable. You know, you can't be holding a violin up that for an hour playing an Indian raga. You know, you have to slouch down.
Yeah, and also for me, I use a shoulder rest.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the very common Western way of doing it, isn't it? But using a shoulder rest is very, very useful because keeping the violin still, if you're trying to shift different positions, is really difficult without the shoulder rest being there because it just creates enough friction. Sort of, it's not like Velcro, but it just sits the violin in place and it works really, really well. But yeah, I think I remember very vaguely doing A-level music and being in a position where I had to play my violin down like so. Or a sort of medieval piece. And I think in Britain a very long time ago, probably because there was some link to the lute and the lyre and those, that there was this sort of penchant to play it from this angle. It does actually work. It's not impossible to do, but I think the more complicated things are better on the shoulder.
Yeah, of course, yeah, like that. Well, I guess I had those little instruments. I mean, the viols were a little bit smaller and stuff like that in that sort of way. I mean, we're getting into cello territory, but the gamba is smaller than the cello, I guess. Viola da gamba. There you go. That's the Australian way. Yeah, we love a little bit of viola da gamba. All right.
That's so cool. So do you find in Australia, Egypt, and Britain, which country seems to be most open to new music from different cultures? Which place?
I think Australia is just happening like that because it is, as I said, a multicultural society. You know, it just exists. You know, there's different people from around the world. And here, I mean, it depends on the type of immigration. I think Australia is a bit more diverse in its immigration. Here is, you know, is more certain cultures, you know, depending on colonization, of course, of who came over, you know, sort of thing. So I think Australia's got a great quality as well because we also have a chip on our shoulder. So we tend to work a little bit harder at getting that chip off the shoulder off. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great musicians around the world and in Australia. And when I go around the world and see some, you know, some people just have some cities just have a charisma. You know, if you learn in Berlin or if you learn in somewhere like that, you know, in Europe, it doesn't really make you a better musician. I mean, you can be, but also I'm a strong believer is that you can be a great musician from anywhere. It doesn't mean you have to be in a certain city to make you that. But certain cities do have a charisma, make you feel like, oh, you're a better classical musician if you're from here or there and things like that. So, you know, I go back to Egypt and I still find terrible players in Egypt. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're going to find great wood players. And it's basically again someone's personal story, the passion that they put into it, how much amount of listening, how much you know study and passion they have in the instrument to really live it. You know, that's the great artists. I think the ones that really put their time into it and really enjoy it and really feel connected with it.
That's amazing. I wonder, where do you see your playing moving from here? So do you imagine that some things will change, that you're going to other genres? Do you feel that you want to go to other countries and study further, or perhaps even study more instruments?
No, the study's done for me. I'm all done on that sort of stuff. But then again, I'm always playing my instrument, always composing and stuff like that. So it's really just a personal study between me and the instrument now, whatever gets discovered. And I do come up with things I can't play that I work on. I wrote a concerto about in 2017. And so that I wrote a lot of things that I couldn't play, to be honest. So, but you just work at them and you believe that you can do them. It's possible. It's a possible idea, and it's just about working at it and making it comfortable. And again, music for me is a vocabulary, so it's about building up your vocabulary. I think it's just like anything. You're a smart cookie. You write. You're an articulate young lady. And you've got to build up your vocabulary. And the more vocabulary you have, the more option you have at a certain period of time of using that. It's not about using it all the time. And it's also about knowing when to use it. Just because you have a vocabulary doesn't mean you should use it or you should use things all the time. So it's about picking your moments, just like writing. I guess it's sentence structure and paragraphs and creating a story musically. That's also the same way. Phrasing is very important in music. The phrase of something, and I think it's particularly in Western classical music as well, with such nuanced takes on the same piece. Sometimes it's about the phrasing and the nuance and where a vibrato occurs or where a volume occurs, or what I mean, dynamics. And well, dynamics is volume, but I thought I'd be smart and add that one in, just show off my vocabulary. But yeah, I think it is the same. It's just building a vocabulary and knowing when to use it. And then when you meet other musicians, you have an option of their vocabulary and how that works with yours. It's like a conversation. So especially with cross-cultural collaborations, it's very important to find a middle ground. Otherwise, you end up speaking two different languages, and that's just not great collaboration, really. Always think collaboration is when you find a middle point and the two artists are familiar with both the different types of music. And just recently, the American tour I did was with the Australian Chamber Orchestra, who played Vivaldi, so the Four Seasons. And, that piece has been done to death. But, with the addition of an oud and a rick, the tambourine, it really adds a different sound to it. And, it really doesn't feel foreign at all. And again, it's about picking your moments. I don't play in the whole thing. It's just in the parts which sound appropriate to the music and do it justice, I guess.
I think there is a real sense that that there can be a musician who can use so much vibrato they never do anything else. Everything is vibrato. And equally, an author can use overly flowery words where it's not needed. For example, in a character perhaps who doesn't express themselves that way or wouldn't naturally express themselves that way. And I remember a very long time ago, I was reading a veterinary book, and in this book, they had reviews at the end, and there was an old Cambridge vet. He was an old sort of very overly pragmatic sort of character. And he'd written, I was so annoyed to read in this last magazine that you'd written a single deceased bovine. Could you not have just said a dead cow? You didn't need to do that. I just need the information that I need. And so in each situation you do with your vocabulary, you have to be aware of what people want to read, who the audience is, and also what you want to portray and how you want to portray.
But it's also exhaustion. You know what I mean? Sometimes someone's mind reading something or listening to something, that type of style of writing is exhausting as well. The too many ideas in a short space of time can sometimes do also affect the listener. But you've got also different types of music that really have no regard for the audience either. Free jazz stuff like that. These guys, these musicians, I mean, I don't know how many free jazzers listen to this, but even in contemporary classical music, I mean, look, I'm too old for it. Do you know what I mean? Just give me some nice melody, some nice harmony, and let me go home. I'm too old for this. I think Charles Ives, the composer, he said, I think somebody was walking out of his concert once, and he said, "Sit down and take your dissonance like a man." So, but I'm too old for that. I just need something really like sweet and lovely, and you don't exhaust me, man. Life's getting hard anyway. There's so much stuff. We're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I can't be doing just it's I don't know what to call it. Self-serving weird music, man. It's just self-serving. It's just like I don't know. I've played with also contemporary ensembles like that, and I'm like, man, I played once in the early days of my career, because when I was so open, wanting to do everything, with they call themselves an improvised punk band. I won't mention their name. An improvised punk band, but jazz, and it was just terrible. There was a guy, the drum kit. He had a broom, and he was like, I don't know, he was just hitting it into this drum kit and throwing things at it. And the guitarist, whenever he'd get some feedback, would really push that. And the clarinetist, he didn't have a mouthpiece, so it was just all this clicking and sucking sound. And I was just like, oh man, what the hell have I got myself into? So anyway, yeah, that in those terms, that's more like just expression. Not timed expression. It's just is what it is. So I respect those guys in their confidence, because I could never do anything like that on stage. I think that's the only thing you can celebrate, is basically their confidence. It's it's like me wearing a very flimsy outfit. It's like me walking around the streets in a bikini. I mean, it's not a good look, but you got to admire the confidence. that's exactly what the music's like. You got to admire the confidence of that. But it's not serving anyone. It's not in anyone's interest that I'd be doing that. But hey, I'm confident.
It's such a good point, because modern classical music is inherently strange, and there is a heck of a lot of dissonance. There's a lot of timing changes. It's very difficult for the audience to follow it.
Well, it's very hard to do. It's music that no one you're not going to rush out and buy the CD. You know what I mean? No, but it's just like this. Look, it's more about the composer than the music. I really don't. Sometimes I go, oh, this piece is called Rain Dance, and then it's just like a whole bunch of noise. But what I find with those classical experiments, like they've been done. It's very hard to do something new that's acceptable. And you had people that did it well: Schoenberg, Webern, Ligeti, Bartok, even. Like these guys, they hammered it, man. Like they did a really, there is, things are hard. Some of them are hard pieces to take, but there is some sort of beauty in it, in some weird roughness. I don't mind that kind of German expressionism, but a lot of it's hard. The modern stuff is like, how are you modern, and sometimes beautiful melodies are ruined. What I find, sorry, I'm going on my little rant here, Deborah, is well, I found something fascinating. Was totally lost it now. Oh, I had a really good point. It was so good. It was so good on my rant. Again, the jet lag just kicked in at that moment. Oh.
So you were talking about different classical composers who'd done these experiments really, really well.
Yeah.
Like Bartok and others. And I was actually
this is what I got. There's no melody anymore. I never hear any melody. It's all texture. And that is what annoys me. It's like people are scared of melody. And that is like the basic sort of thing. And also structure. Like if you gave me something terrible, but it was structured, it'd actually be okay. And this is the point, because I did see a concert in New York, and I was like, man, the pieces that they delivered, none of them had structure. Just when you thought a nice melody would develop, zero. So like it's just, what is it now? And then what happens? The audience still stand on their feet at the end. And it's also just the accepting of things. The story is greater than what's being created sometimes, and that is a little bit of a problem. Just do things well, just have a bit of structure. And now that's the great people that experimented all had structure. There's something, that held it together, and now nothing holds it together. Sometimes it's just like it just goes. It just goes in one direction. There's no roundness to it. For me, a piece is round. It's whole. This one just goes. You don't even know where it finishes. And people always have an awkward silence, not knowing when to applaud. I'm not saying have a perfect cadence at the end of it. Bum bum. I think every contemporary piece should just finish like that. And just give you the audience cue to clap. But yeah, I think at the moment, just texture. Just give me a melody. And also like contemporary opera, just give us a nice aria. Or put an aria in there. It doesn't have to be, why does everything have to be so freeform and grotesque? You know what I mean? Our ears are much nicer than that. But in saying that, look, some pieces are beautiful in their grotesqueness as well. So we've got to take the good and the bad.
Definitely. I mean, what do you think of composers like Stravinsky, Shostakovich, those sort of Russian composers who really revolutionized, definitely people uncomfortable with their music?
Yeah.
There was still, I don't know if you agree, but there was still really some structure there.
My God, they're king of structures. They've got it. And also, they also wrote beautiful music. It wasn't that's the only thing they did. You know what I mean? People now, that's the only thing they do. It's like they have a computer program. It's like they don't even look and they're just putting notes, in there. It's just, man. Like, it is frustrating because, you read the story and you go, oh, okay, wow, we're in for a treat here. And then you go, even that was pretty good. That was that. You know what I mean?
That was actually more structured.
In this movement, they're gonna blow into their violins, signifying the wind. Just stop it already. Just stop. Just stop it. I haven't got time for this. I'm telling you, I'm becoming an old cranky man. Like the generation before me, they go, oh, those youngins, they don't know what we had it, whatever. Now I'm like that. I'm in the generation. Back in the day, we used to pay $15 for a burger. And now it's like 25. You know what I mean? And the generation before, I used to pay $2 a burger. Oh, I used to get a whole meal for $2. And then before that, 3 tup, whatever.
It's so true, and I really feel the same way that when people look at the Rite of Spring.
But you're an old soul. You're an old soul. You still manage to be in that kind of, you still you enjoy the beautiful things of life, which I don't think people are getting. I think youngsters are now, honestly, in this day and age, it's just like TikTok. It's a fast pace of life. Life is getting faster. The attention span is getting smaller. You know what I mean? Like even with me, like even clips now, I'd just rather read something. I don't want to even open it up. I'm too lazy to open up a video clip. I say what this person's saying on an interview. Then you have your 3 seconds worth, and from your 3 seconds, you can then form a political opinion. And so no one reads anything in depth. Everything's skimming, and it's just the times we live in. And so I think the great thing about classical music and Arabic music, it gives you time to just chill, man. Sit back. Kulthum songs were 40 minutes at least, an hour and a half, and you've committed to that hour and a half, and you're on a journey for that bit. That's what symphonies are. Just sit there, 4 movements, the story, they're telling you what's going on. So I think that's the beauty of it. It's that calming down. It's that appreciating the great artists that came before you and their contribution to the human soul.
Definitely. And that is absolutely amazing, because I think it's an incredible message to send to the audience as well, about what makes music beautiful, because I think somewhat that's been lost somewhere along the way in wanting to make things either very profitable, similar concepts in popular music, or whether it be modern classical music. I think it is important to discuss what makes music beautiful, and as you've shown, it comes from representing culture, emotion, personality, character. All of these aspects can be translated into the music. And I think it's a really fantastic message to send. And I'm extremely grateful for you joining me today.
Oh, thanks, Deborah.
About these topics. It's lovely.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me on. I hope people watching it aren't like, oh, who's this idiot? She could have done better. Oh, that Deb's really skimming the bottom of the barrel now.
No, I think they're absolutely going to love it, and it's a breath of fresh air as well. And your humor is fantastic, and it really just lightens up the
Oh,
whole.
thanks. Oh,
Just
thanks, Deborah.
so thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye bye.